Hey, it's James, Father's Rights and Resources with the hashtag How I Got Custody. Most people fail to paint a picture of the best interest of the child in court. Everything is supposed to be in the best interest of the child. We know that it's not. It's not because the laws are bad. When the law says the best interest of the child, that's a great law. You and your lawyers are just too dumb or lazy or don't use common sense God gave a monkey, and you don't try and paint a picture to the court and un-brainwash the court. The court thinks the best interest is custody of the mother and the father's every other weekend visitor. That's a corrupt, perverted version of what's best for a kid. So, what you need to do is paint a picture, first of all, for yourself so you can wake the hell up and get back into reality. And then you need to articulate that to the court and paint a picture to the court. So, the best interest of a child is for both parents to be intact in a married family and to be loving and protective of the children. That's the best interest. If you had a kid out of wedlock, that's not the ideal best interest. If you work with the mother and co-parent with her, you're getting as close to the best interest as possible. You should have the audacity and the nerve to go to court and say, this is really what's the best interest of the children. You know, psychologists and counselors tell parents who are living together and married, spend quality time and quantity of time with your kids. So even when you're in the home, you could fall short of the best interest. That's why I said the best interest is a loving, married home where both parents are, they're healthy. Everybody has a healthy relationship. It's not toxic. A lot of people say, oh, well, I did fine. I grew up growing up with just a mom, or I grew up fine, but bullcrap. You probably have some deep-seated psychological issues and stuff like that. But even then, it doesn't say 100% of kids without a father end up being murderers or drug addicts. It says it goes up 10 to 20 to 100 times. Child abuse goes up 400 times when the mother gets a new boyfriend or a stepdad, because mothers are so horrible at protecting kids and they pick the wrong guy. That's extremely far apart. See, when you know the target, let's think of a bullseye. The target is the best interest, that red dot right in the middle. All the other stuff is not the ideal thing. It doesn't give you the most points. Yeah, okay, so you were never married, but you co-parent together. Okay, that's not the dot, a married, intact family, because even kids know they know instinctively God's design. They get jealous of other kids at school, have mom and dad, and they have a married, loving family. That's ideal. That's the ideal. So somewhere around the bullseye, you are separated and you're getting along. You never go to family court and you co-parent well. Then you go to family court and parent's trying to push the other parent out, and you have this every other week. That's way off the the bullseye, the dartboard. So if you know what the target is, if you know what the rules of the road are, like driving on the right side of the road, that you know that anything other than that is a wrong way of doing it, a perverted way of doing it. Driving on, the opposite way in the opposite direction, driving on the curb, driving in the shoulder. There's all kinds of ways to do something wrong when you know there's one way to do it right. So if you focus on the ideal right way right now, and just say, I give an example all the time. If you got a big gash on your leg is ideally perfectly healthy until you do something to damage your body or system. You get a big gash on your leg. Okay, now it's injured. Now it's dysfunctional. Like, let's say you got a 6-inch gash and it goes it's like, a quarter of an inch or like 4 or 5 millimeters down. You need to get stitches. And when you sew it up, there will be a scar. It won't look as perfectly beautiful. Or let's say you have a knee surgery. You have a tendon or something like that's jacked up. You got to go and do the knee surgery. It's not going to be 100% like it was originally, but you sew it up and repair it. And you don't leave the wound open. If you have a wound, you have one flap over here, one flap over here. You don't sew and stitch one side and leave the other one open. You don't sew a mother back together with a child and a father and leave the father open and let that wound fester. You sew it back together. Now, it doesn't look as perfect as it did, or a broken vase. You glue it back together. And you might be able to glue it so if you're in the room 10 feet away, it looks brand new. But if you get up real close, you see the cracks and stuff. But it's not as good as new, but it's better than after it was broken up. So the ideal target, the bullseye, is a married, loving family with parents with a healthy relationship with their kids and no toxicity or dysfunction like drugs or whatever. Okay, you can have the married family and somebody's abusive or somebody's on drugs or whatever, and so you're still falling short. So if that's the ideal, We don't need to change the laws. We just need to make better arguments in the court and unbrainwash the judges, because the judges think custody of the mom every other weekend, because our society is used to that. Just like society is used to black people being on the other side of the road and whites only restaurants here, black restaurants here, whites water fountains. Right nowadays, we would say that's insane or crazy, but that was the norm in society. You could walk around. It was the norm in the entire history of the world to have slavery. In every culture in the history of the world, we've had slavery. Most people don't know that because we're not taught that, because we only teach, like, what happened here in America. There were more white slaves in North Africa than there were up here, black slaves. We weren't really taught that, and the viciousness of the Arab nations, castrating the Africans so that they wouldn't repopulate, was even just as vicious or even worse than the American slave owners. So if we now that we know what we know today, that's totally perverted. The first slave owner in America was black. He had like 15 slaves. The more his slaves he could get, the more free acres he could get. So the first slave owner was black, and a lot of people don't know that, but it was so normal that there were even black slave owners, natives enslaved one another and all that stuff. So anyway, my point is that it's shocking today to even think of treating someone like a pet or an animal, or having them on a leash and owning them. But it was the norm throughout all of history. Now that we've woken up, now it's not the norm, so we don't even think about that. Now there's places like Libya where there's still a slave trade going on, and so we think that that's insane. So when you realize the ideal and you get it ingrained in your numbnut skull, and you stop being a pussy thinking, see, they're taking you off the target. They're taking you out into the deep waters of, we're starting with a presumption of every other weekend. That's in perverted world. That's back in the days of slavery. We're thinking, nowadays everybody's free, everybody's an equal human being in the eyes of God, equal value, so we don't enslave people. But back then, we didn't care. Humans didn't care. Okay? Until European countries in America just said, this is crazy. And then they started unbrainwashing people, and people started waking up. And Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and other civil rights activists were on TV, and people related to them, and people's hearts started changing. We need to get the judges' hearts to change from the corrupt mentality that men are slaves or second-class parents. But you need to paint the picture in court. But most of you guys don't even got that picture ingrained in your own skull, because you're such a pussy and you're so intimidated that you're going into court and bowing. You should walk into court like you're the king of the jungle. There's no alpha male lion in the pride that's afraid to step up when another alpha comes in and tries to challenge and take his kids away. When an alpha confronts a lion pride, an outside alpha, they'll come in. If they fight him and they win, they will kill all the cubs, and then they'll mate and they'll start their own lineage. That's probably why instinctively, that human nature, a new boyfriend or a stepdad, they end up abusing the kids 400 times more often than a biological dad. The safest place for a child is a biological dad. That's another argument to bring in court. If the number one most important thing you can provide with kids is safety, then there's the love of the parents or fatherly affirmation. Okay? So if a kid's not safe and you love your kid while they're getting molested by the mom's boyfriend, it doesn't matter whether you love them. Safety is the most important. Who provides safety better? The bigger, stronger, masculine man with more muscles, or a woman? Vast majority of kids are molested by the new guy the mother brings around. In fact, a real proficient pedophile who went to prison for molesting like 100 boys says he targets single mom homes. He stays away if he sees a strong male threat. That's God's order. As soon as a strong male threat is there, that brings protection without even a fight. Some animals ward off other animals by just standing strong. Like a lion pride won't attack elephants when they get a bunch of them together. They just stand there and they just walk off because they're like, I don't want any part of that. So back to the best interest. If you see the best interest of the child is the intact family home, you're like, okay, we need to get as close as possible. What's as close as possible? 50-50. The mother wants to move away. Okay, she's getting away from the ideal. She doesn't care. She's not putting the kids first. She's being selfish. And you have to be unselfish to be a parent. She doesn't have the basic parenting 101 skill of being unselfish. You got to wake up in the middle of the night, clean diapers. You got to take kids to soccer practice. You don't have your own time anymore. If you're not selfish, if you're not unselfish, you're an unfit parent. And she's saying, oh, I want this lifestyle, new boyfriend, new work, new this. You created a kid with somebody. You have to revolve everything around the kid and make that work. so that you can keep the family as intact as possible. When you know what the target is, everything that misses the target, and when it's way off, you can articulate it better. Make up your mind to understand the ideal